What's so fascinating about the opening song is you don't see people of color.
Because it's all about this town looking
exactly
how they imagine themselves. All of the frames, it's meant to show them trying to glaze over
yes.
it until they can't.
That's the narrative that they want to stick. That's the narrative that they want passed down. You never see the white people in this town show this level of rage at anything else happening throughout the entire story. But we know that there are strange things happening in Derry all the time.
The whole thing of the song is like, a smile is something precious. And the little girl is like, as long as I appear special because I have this, this smile and this ribbon, I'll be happy. The bigger I smile, the happier I seem, then the happier I feel, right? It's all about appearances. As long as you can brush over and glaze over all of these things happening and people out in public and in the streets of Derry can look like everything is fine, they can ignore all this ugliness underneath. But you can't ignore the presence of Black people. And it's a constant reminder of your failings. Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. My name is Esther.
And I'm Adrian.
And today we're here to talk about it. Welcome to Derry, episodes 5 and 6.
Yes, we are back from the break.
Yes, little hiatus.
And what a way for them to introduce us back into the world of Derry, which is to sit us through some very traumatic stuff.
A merciful Father. Well, let us begin.
They are doing a good job of building up the suspense to whatever is going to take place in these last 2 episodes. I will commend them on that because while that little juke joint was going on, I was terrified for everyone in that building.
Yeah. See, this back to episode 5, when they mentioned the augury, the first thing I wrote in my notes was get all the Black people out of town ASAP.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I just know for a fact
Dude,
this is going to have something to do with them. Then when the bus crashed and he got away and he said something attacked the bus, I said, nope, Pennywise is at work. He's orchestrated something. But then the only thing I was confused about was I was like, I know this has to have something to do with the little spot that the soldiers are setting up, the black spot, because I was like, well, that's just, it's all happening at once. Doesn't make sense. Yeah. And then when the two things collided and Hank Grogan was at the black spot, I said, I already know. I already know what the augury is.
Oh boy. Listen, man, this show continues to remind us that there are 2 horrors at play here. Sometimes working in tandem, but equally as terrifying.
When they first mentioned the shedding, when we're in the room with all the people of the indigenous community who are a part of that sacred order, and they're basically just kind of dropping some lore on us for like how this works. And they talk about like how Pennywise sheds and it's in the water because he's in the pipes.
Yeah.
And that is, causing an uptick in like violent behavior in the citizens of Derry. I don't know. I can't remember if it's the next scene or like a couple scenes later. I'm pretty sure it's the very next scene where we see Hank getting arrested and that white man runs up on him and tries to shoot him.
Yeah.
It just reminds me, any time there is something happening that is having a negative impact on any community, even if that thing that's happening is not necessarily race-based, the most vulnerable people in a community always bear the brunt of whatever the impact is, right? Yeah. Like, obviously, Pennywise shedding is not based on race, right? But because of, like, the structural racism at play, the impact of what's happening is going to land heaviest on the Black people and on the children in the town because those are the most vulnerable and unprotected communities.
Yeah.
We saw that immediately with Hank, and now we're going to see it happen again with whatever is about to happen at the black spot. Like, putting those 2 things together, I just knew innately, I was like, this is all leading up to something atrocious and racist and violent. And now we know. It's
so interesting you use that language because I had intent versus impact here in terms of how we talk about what racism looks like. Mm-hmm. This show is doing such a good job of displaying what racist intent looks like versus racism due to impact. It really comes out with General Shaw. Because in the first episode, we are sort of introduced to this man as someone that's like, I love everyone despite of their race. You know, Leroy comes in and he's obviously experiencing some racism, and Shaw checks that, right? And so we are immediately given the implication that like, oh, his values are rock solid, right? Like his moral compass is centered. He understands the climate that he's bringing this black man into, and he is using his power and privilege while he works in Derry to make sure that he's safe. So he might think internally, I am doing a good job, but every action that he's taken after that moment, due to the impact of that, has always led to some person of color being harmed. Whether it's Leroy being attacked underneath there, or it's him using people of color against other people of color, like what he did with Taniel and Halloran, right? And then on top of all of that, he has this inability to take like full on accountability. Like his plan backfires. He almost tries to blame it on the indigenous people, right? And I feel like he genuinely thinks that he might be on the right side of history, right? Like he's watching the news, he's seeing the race riots happening in Mississippi, and you can clearly see this look of concern on his face, right? Further leading into what he says earlier on in the season, what we see some of the other police officers in Derry say, this isn't the South. You don't have to worry about these things here. But it's like he's not picking up on how his usage of power is still resulting indirectly in people of color still being harmed. We talked about this when we first watched it last week, of like General Shaw's got this entire military, but like he's watching what's happening on the news to people in Mississippi, but there's black people in Derry that are being wrongly accused, and he knows it's that they're innocent because he knows the power that he's going against with it.
That ties in a little bit to what I was thinking about the indigenous characters in the story, you know, Rose and the rest of the indigenous people in her community. A lot of what we're seeing happen right now is the outflow of Rose telling General Shaw when they were kids about the entity, right? And she didn't just tell him about the entity, she told him everything, right?
Yeah.
Like all of this stuff that was kind of like sacred and secret, she told all of it to him. And she was a child. I'm not faulting her. But I do think that this show makes a strong case, I would say, for gatekeeping. I'm not trying to be funny, but like,
I hear you though.
I do feel like the show is showing in some ways the way that like cultural practice and cultural tradition are forms of protection. They're forms, they're a way that marginalized people sustain themselves, right? They show that in a very literal way, where the indigenous people have that weapon made from the meteor that is a physical boundary, right? It physically protects them from the entity, which is why she gives it to Taniel when they go into the sewers. And you see in the scene where she's talking to Taniel in the after he was arrested, and they're kind of having the whole conversation. And first they're talking in their own language, which is another form of protection, right?
Yeah.
It gives you secrecy. It allows you to, keep information within your community, even when there are other people nearby who are a danger to you.
Yeah.
But what happens? The officer hears that and tells them to speak English.
Yeah.
Then immediately after that, he also takes that weapon, which I feel like just draws such a strong parallel between like how both of those things, both traditions, are a form of protection. And I was really thinking at the beginning of episode 5, as we're seeing all of the things that these people know about the entity, like what is it that is protecting the indigenous people from the entity? And I know part of it is that from what I understand, their reservation is like not within the boundaries of Derry. I know that's part of it, but they do obviously like Rose's shop is in Derry, right? Like they are still in and out of this town. And I honestly feel like the thing that is protecting them is the knowledge that they have.
Yeah. Because
they pass on all of this knowledge, their people are protected. They know what to do to stay safe. And I also think it makes them less vulnerable to attacks by it, because when faced with something like that, they would understand what it is. The thing that makes all of these children so vulnerable is that they don't know what it is. They can't explain it to anybody. And so no adults believe them. So there's no protection because they have no knowledge. But the indigenous people do have knowledge. And so again, it's just another example of how these cultural practices and cultural traditions, they're not just things, right? They are literally ways that marginalized people protect themselves. It's how we make sure that we survive through to the next generation after that. And that's why so many people are very protective of them and trying to keep them insular, because it is a risk when you open the door to somebody who is not a part of that tradition, especially a person who is white and has some sort of societal privilege. It is a risk, right? It's not just like some silly thing. Like, I know people talk about cultural appropriation in a kind of surface level way, like hairstyles, things like that. But it's not just that. It can pose like a very real threat to a community. As we see in this episode, right? Like, she shares this sacred knowledge with Francis, and all he's able to hear from that is filtered through his opportunism, right? See, all he hears is another opportunity for whatever he is viewing as the right thing. But all of that is shaded by his positioning in America, right? Because he's a white man, because he eventually joins the military, his priorities are very different from Rose's. And so he does something very different with that information that puts them at risk. I also think in relation to that, though, about like the knowledge being a protection, we notice like Will has not had any like encounters since he told his parents. Yes. Like, ever since he's told his parents and his parents believed him. Listen. He hasn't seen anything other than obviously when they were in the sewers, but that's not a vision. That's like he literally there. So yeah, he's going to see him. But ever since then, he hasn't had anything show up. And then you contrast that to Lily. Right. Who has nobody to believe her, who has nobody to protect her, who is completely alone and isolated. And she's extremely vulnerable to the attacks because of that. It's a theme of safety, right? Because I mean, even when they build up that juke joint, we get even more insight on Dick Halloran's character, where he is consistently tormented by the weight of the trauma that he is carrying due to his shining ability. And, you know, in the after credits, they essentially say like, he makes this as an opportunity for him to escape. Right. And the strength, I loved how he said it, where it's like he can't block out the noise, but because the music and the singing and the loud shouting and clapping is so loud, it drowns it out. And he can use it as a moment to escape. I also think it's worth noting, too, that even if Hank Rogan had not been hiding in the black spot, those types of institutions were never safe. Like, whiteness and white supremacy understands what they represent. It's the same reason why they tried to strip Native American people of their language and of their culture and their religious practices, right? Because they understand that these things represent a sort of safety to guard marginalized people from the oppressive forces that be. The oppressive forces that be view those spaces and those practices as a threat. There is a reason why Bauer, is that his name? The police man. He could have told the rest of the cops about the tip, and they could have just arrested Hank Grogan. But what does he say when he's telling the men in the bar? Due to the nature of the place, it shouldn't surprise us. You already had preconceived notions about what a place like that represented, and you were looking for a reason to take this type of action. This was not your only course of action. I understand you got fired, but like, you could have told the people in charge about this tip. Now, how different would it have played out? Don't really know, to be honest. But still, you specifically went outside of the law, took the most violent course of action that's going to cause the most damage to people who are innocent. that have nothing to do with what Hank Grogan did, because just the fact that this place exists near your town, you are seeing it as a threat because Black people are comfortable and happy in public.
What was the term called that the indigenous people said? Like this, it's like the culminating.
The augury.
The augury. It's so fitting that the episode before these white people show up to the juke joint, we get the mention of this augury, that it's like the culmination of these things that have sort of been building up over time. Because I feel like that is like the perfect way to describe when riots and massacres happened to people of color in America. It's this building up over time, right? Like it wasn't just like a snap of the finger, Tulsa happens. No, like there were several years of white anger and white resentment. And it was like they just needed a reason. It's so interesting because one of the things that I had in my notes was like, you never see the white people in this town show this level of rage at anything else happening throughout the entire story. But we know that there are strange things happening in Derry all the time. Mm-hmm. We know that kids go missing. We know that kids are unalived. We know that there is abuse happening, all kinds of abuse happening. We know, to the kids specifically, we know that there's abuse happening to the women. We know that for a fact. None of that raised alarms. None of that raised that kind of level of anger until they were able to focus their energy on a person of color. Now all of a sudden the town is all galvanized together. Now all of a sudden they're locked in. They're putting posters up, trying to pull on like citizens arrests and whatnot.
I feel like it's because Blackness is a visual reminder of the failings, whereas other things can be ignored.
Yes.
It's like in the song, like the intro to the episodes, right? And the whole thing of the song is like, a smile is something precious and a ribbon. And they're basically, and the little girl is like, as long as I appear special because I have this, this smile and this ribbon, I'll be happy. The bigger I smile, the happier I seem, then the happier I feel, right? It's all about appearances. As long as you can brush over and glaze over all of these things happening and people out in public and in the streets of Derry can look like everything is fine, they can ignore all this ugliness underneath. But you can't ignore the presence of Black people. And it's a constant reminder of your failings, your moral failings.
I put this down in my notes. What's so fascinating about the opening song is you don't see people of color.
Because it's all about this town looking
exactly
how they imagine themselves. And then in the shadows underneath, there's like this creeping darkness underneath everything. But all of the frames, it's meant to show them trying to glaze over it until they can't, and as it gets progressively worse.
It just keeps building up over time. And that's the narrative that they want to stick. That's the narrative that they want passed down, right? But we're seeing the story from the audience perspective. And we know that there's Black people there. We know that they're experiencing racism in integrating into these towns that are predominantly white. We see that they are experiencing bullying and microaggressions in school, in the workplace. In episode 5, we see that the bulk of the inmates in this predominantly white town are men of color. As they're being shipped out, we see that there's racism. We see that there's fear of interracial relationships. We see that there's fear of lynchings, but that's never going to be the history that gets told if it was just left up to the white people in Derry.
Mm-hmm. One thing we talked about after our first watch of last week's episode, which is just about like the story that Jim Shaw is telling himself about what he is doing versus what he's actually doing, right? Where he's telling himself that he's trying to get hold of this entity so that he can use it to protect America. But in so doing, he is endangering American citizens. The way that the U.S. military presents itself and the story that it tells about itself does not always align with reality, because they use the ideas of protecting America and being a dominant world power, overpowering other countries interchangeably as if it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's not. One does not always lead to the other, right? In your pursuit to dominate over other countries, you are not actually acting in the best interest of American people, as we see with what General Shaw is doing, right? This is not about protection. This is about you gaining access to a weapon that you think could outdo all the other weapons that that your foreign enemies have. And in searching for that weapon, you are not protecting Americans. You are putting them more at risk.
Yeah.
And so the story that the U.S. military tells about itself, I just find is often not true. And we've seen that play out in reality as well, with like the testing for atomic bombs and like the exposure to radiation. What you're doing is not about protection. It's about dominance. And in your search for dominance, you actually put people at risk.
Right. It's also interesting because he's not catching the irony of the story he's telling himself, because he doesn't understand what it or Pennywise is.
Yeah.
Right? Pennywise is feeding off of the racism that's existing in Derry. And General Shaw is thinking, if we can let this loose and learn how to control it, then we'll be safe. Meanwhile, in this episode, he's watching news footage of racist, violent acts happening in other parts of the country. Other opportunities for Pennywise to feed off of.
The only other thing I had, Miss Ingrid.
Yo.
I just want to say right now, I don't know what's going on in Hollywood right now, but there have been so many pieces of media this year that have been like, and what did we learn? Don't trust a white lady. There is like, I'm not like, just think about it for a second. Even just the things that we've reviewed, Sinners, although I don't really think that's what Sinners was talking about, but people did take that from Sinners, but I don't really think that's what it was going for. But if you want to include Sinners, but I wasn't even thinking about Sinners. I was thinking about Wicked with Glinda. I was thinking about The Boys with, what's her face? Kate? Is that her name?
Oh.
Kate. I'm just like, listen, I don't know what's going on over there, but white women are getting a lot of heat this year. Ingrid, girl, get a hold of yourself. I knew there was something wrong with her. I just had an inkling. I was like, we cannot trust this lady, and we can't. Hank.
You know what people are thinking? They're theorizing that she shows up in It 2. In It 2, Beverly Marsh goes and visits this old lady that's used to live in her old house, right? Or old apartment. And it's like, starts off, obviously, something's unsettling, but you just don't really know where it's coming from. And the old lady says, my father used to work in the circus. And we see a picture that looks similar to what we get of the dancing clown, right? So I think those are going to be the same people.
Oh, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
Dang, so she lives.
And I guess that's a bit of a spoiler. Well, I mean, a lot of this is spoilers once you kind of connect the dots for some of these characters.
Yeah, but it makes sense that she survives. The show can't really have a happy ending.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they don't defeat him.
Yeah.
And what we've seen so far is that the people who are the most at risk are the people who choose to stand on the right side and protect children, like what happened with Russo, what we're seeing with the parents, Will's parents. So, yeah, if you're siding with the clown, I guess it makes sense you survive.
I was gonna give my praises to Lily. She finally got a W, but then she started bugging out a little bit.
You know who does need to get their flowers? Marge.
Yeah.
Marge, I doubted you, but you really proved yourself. You really proved yourself.
She's coming along. I
respect it.
Also,
I respect it.
What's his name? Richie on the little drums. It's like, hey, go ahead, my boy, going crazy.
And now my only request: all y'all kids get out of there.
Get out of there, because nothing will end well. We know this.
Number one, adults, black people.
Why are they giving it? What they putting that? You put that lean in that Coke. That's crazy, bro.
What's going on? Why? First of all, we're giving alcohol to children. We're having children partake in the festivities at a very adult venue. No. Send these children home.
All right, y'all. Those are our thoughts. We're looking forward to hear what you guys think about these 2 episodes. Let us know in the comment sections below. Always love to hear the things that you guys bring to our conversations. And with that, we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.